welcome everyone. I don't know where you're calling from, so good morning or good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this webinar for today. So the name of this webinar is Does Network Security Still Matter in the Serverless Era on AWS? And I see some familiar names here. So I think there were some previous attendants in the other AWS webinars I hosted, so that's great. So for those who don't know me yet, I'm your host, I'm Laurent Mathieu, and I'm thrilled to have you here today as we will dive into network security on AWS and in particular in the serverless domain. And during this webinar, I will be sharing some insights and practical tips about how to handle network security in those architecture. But just before we kick off the presentation, as I usually ask the participants, I would just like to invite you to just write on the chat what is your level of familiarity with AWS. So if you have, for example, no experience at all, some experience, you already use the console and maybe access a few services, or maybe some of you are very familiar with AWS. Okay, so no experience or some experience. Okay, all right. So the webinar is also tailored for this situation. So just maybe I will give a few additional explanation as we dive in. So now it's time for the quick introduction. I'm just quickly going to introduce myself and present the agendas for today's session. So my background is in cybersecurity. I've been working in that domain for the past 20 years. And over the past 5 years, I really focused on AWS cloud as well. And nowadays I'm working probably a bit more on AWS cloud, and also I'm doing cybersecurity. So my core domain is AWS security, but I can also work on architecture projects. I work with DevOps people. And sometimes I work on cybersecurity topics which are not related to AWS. What I like working in AWS is that for me, it's like a huge toolbox. So we have a service for everything. Nowadays, I think we have over 300 services. And I like building stuff, which was not the case when I started working in security at the beginning. I was more like, like the guy would say, no, you cannot do that, it's too dangerous. So by working in the cloud and AWS, I can, work more with developers and help them building stuff. So that's very exciting. My job nowadays, mostly I'm working as a freelance consultant, and I work with startups like SaaS providers and other SMEs, mostly doing small projects for them. And I discover a very great platform to work on, which is AWS IQ. So AWS IQ is like a marketplace that connects AWS users with AWS freelancers like me, who are certified on AWS. And the more you work on the platform and the more you attract some leads, you get some reviews like Google Maps or Airbnb's. And if the customers are happy with your work, then you can work again with them. So I found a lot of customers this way over the past year, and I like working with these segments like startups. It's quite exciting, the kind of project, and so that's like half of my work, and the other half I'm doing things related to education in cybersecurity and AWS. So I'm a lecturer, I'm a mentor for some bootcamp programs, and I'm an instructor also like here on Securzy. So I always like sharing knowledge, teaching, and I think it's a great way to learn as well, and to see things from a different perspective. So that's a lot of small projects. It looks very busy, but all these projects are not very, I don't have like a big project that takes a huge chunk of my time. And talking about Securzy, so that's my 5th webinar on the topic of AWS security. For those who are members, I believe you can still access the previous webinars as replay. So yeah, just a quick reminder, the first webinar was about building a secure multi-tenant environment in AWS. The second one, I was sharing some insight about how to perform security reviews of AWS environments for your company, for your customers. The third one, we talk about infrastructure as code. So using tools like Terraform, for example, and what are the benefits for security of using this technology. The last one, I had a lot of demand for the last one, which was AWS Essentials for security folks. So a lot of people were new on AWS, like some of you, or limited experience, and they were interested in having like a kickstart presentation about how to get started on AWS. I hope they found some help in that webinar, because obviously when you start there, you see those 300 services and it's very intimidating. Okay, so that's enough for the history and the intro. Again, today we're going to talk about network security in the serverless on AWS. So yeah, that's the agenda for this discussion. So first of all, we're going to talk about NetSec like the traditional way and NetSec in the cloud. Why we have this topic today? So what is serverless and what are the challenges when it comes to network security with serverless? So what is the problem and why do we have this topic today? So I'm going to clarify this. In the cloud, there are several ways of controlling access. You can do network security access control with firewalls and stuff like that, like the thing you find on premises as well. And you have identity access management access control. So any component in the cloud is either an identity or a principal or a resource, and you can use this capability to like regulate the interaction between the components. So we're going to see the differences between both, and then the last part will be about best practices, and I will show you one example. So that's it for today. And without further ado, let's just get started now. So let's talk about the changing landscape of network security. So what has changed in the cloud and what has changed particularly in AWS. So we all heard this term, the fortress approach or castle and moat, which is essentially how we did security like before. Before we still do it. It's still relevant in some ways, but one of the problem with the castle and moat approach is that all the defenses are on the edge, on the perimeter. Yeah, we're focusing on the perimeter, and we try to keep the bad guys, outside the perimeters. So first of all, with this problem, we assume that anything inside the perimeter is safe, which we know today, but is not always the case. And obviously, focusing on the perimeter means once this thing is broken, we have very limited security. So this approach uses a security arsenal, which is based on network security, network-centric technologies. So we're talking about firewalls that you put on the edge of your network, IDS, web application firewall, IPS, you name it, all these things. They are network security, so they really look at the network specifically, sometimes what's inside the packets as well. And they protect mostly on the edge.